Hi, I'm Helen Batten and I'm the author of The Improbable Adventures of Miss Emily Soldene. She's my Victorian ancestor. I was inspired by her extraordinary life as a musical star, opera diva, producer, director, and finally impresario. She not only owned her own production company, putting on shows in the West End and across Britain, but she conquered Broadway and sailed many times to Australia and New Zealand. It was even more extraordinary because Emily was born into poverty. Her mother was an unmarried bonnet maker from Clerkenwell, and Emily had no education or contacts. And before she even learned to sing, she was already married with 2 children and another on the way. Despite this, she managed to become one of the most celebrated actresses of her generation, and mixed with the most influential and interesting people of the time. But perhaps most impressive is the way she reinvented herself in her 50s to become a writer. She published a novel and then a best-selling kiss and tell memoir and became a journalist. I found learning about my ancestor an inspiration. Stay tuned for how I think we could all take a leaf out of Emily's book. Emily's motto was not why me, but why not me? She started her singing lessons when she read a glowing review of the London debut of the singer Adelina Patti and was so filled with an envious rage that she jumped on a bus and rapped on the door of London's best singing teacher demanding lessons. Her great break came into opera when the leading lady of the hit opera The Grand Duchess had a spat with the leading man and stormed off the stage. Despite never having played the Duchess before, having only a couple of hours to rehearse, a costume and shoes that didn't fit, and a leading man whispering obscenities into her ear determined to put her off, Emily stepped up to the stage and was a triumph. She knew this was her big break. She said that Nelson was more likely to be knocked off his column than she was to fail. Her great second career started when she took up the offer of a journalist friend to write theatre reviews for one of Australia's leading newspapers. It led to her being their London correspondent, writing a weekly column on every subject she fancied for the next 11 years, and then she published 2 books. Emily is the original poster girl for seizing the day. Emily's ambition was to become a concert singer, but when after 2 years she still wasn't making any money, she decided to audition for the music hall. She adopted the pseudonym Miss Fitzhenry and received instant success singing tragic ballads. Then, when her music hall burned down and she found herself without a job, she turned her mind to musicals and became the highwayman Captain Macheath in The Beggar's Opera. She realised that male parts quite suited her and took on the role of King Sparkletto in a pantomime and discovered that she could be comic as well as tragic. In later life, when her age meant she could no longer play her old roles, she became a very successful character actress. And not just a versatile actress, Emily also reinvented herself as a businesswoman when she became a producer, director, boss, and impresario, and then she had a whole new career as a journalist. Emily never limited herself or allowed herself to be pigeonholed. Definitely a philosophy to embrace. In the Victorian era, the theatre was one profession where, in theory, women's wages were equal to men's. Actresses had unprecedented freedom and control over their lives. However, when you reached the age of 30, you were considered past it, and success was even more dependent on looks and sexual attractiveness than it is today. Emily was never conventionally pretty and was increasingly taunted for her impressive curves. She knew her days as a leading lady were numbered. So she became a producer, director, and then the owner of the Soldene Opera Booth Company. When she first saw Bizet's new opera Carmen, she knew that this was the part she'd been born to play. She dashed over to Paris, bought the rights, and brought Carmen to the British provinces for the first time, of course giving herself the role of the sexually provocative Gypsy Carmen. Emily suffered from the most terrible stage fright. Her career was nearly over before it had begun when, at her singing debut, she opened her mouth to sing, but nothing came out. Her teacher pinched her hard and hissed, "Go on!" and then the notes came tumbling out. Then her first production as a producer and director was Genevieve de Brabant in the brand new Philharmonic Theatre in Islington. At the dress rehearsal, she lay on stage writhing, sick with nerves and a terrible migraine, not helped by the fact that the owner, Sir Charles Morton, declared it an utter disaster and the composer had gone into hiding. And yet the next day, she was an absolute triumph as the leading lady. Even though sea travel petrified Emily and she was constantly seasick, she insisted on sailing around the globe many times, touring Australia, America and New Zealand. She got through by singing shanties with the sailors, learning to smoke cigarettes, playing poker and drinking a lot of alcohol. While Emily never let nerves stand in her way, she paid a price for her extravagant living with her health. But she seemed to think it was worth it. As she said in her memoir, "My art has been, and still is, the one great delight of my life." Emily not only had a breathtakingly exciting professional life, but she took full advantage of her status as a Victorian celebrity by going to every social event possible. She said that the day she went to the Derby and saw her horse win was the best day of her life. Fortunately, she kept a diary of all these wonderful adventures with the idea that if she was ever down on her luck, she could use them. The moment came when she found herself stranded in Australia with no money for the passage home. She used all the material she'd been gathering to write a novel, and then the most outrageous kiss-and-tell memoir ever published, which became one of the best-selling books of 1898. For me, Emily's life is inspiring. If you think so too and would like to know more, The Improbable Adventures of Miss Emily Soldene, actress, writer and rebel Victorian, is out now in paperback, ebook and audiobook.